Stop me if you've heard this before. DC Comics are doing major retcons, essentially wiping out every major event since 1985. So if you are a fan of Crisis on Infinite Earths, 0 Hour Crisis in Time, Kingdom Come, Infinite Crisis, Final Crisis, Flashpoint, The New 52, The Multiversity, Dark Nights Metal, Doomsday Clock, and Dark Nights Death Metal, and you were invested in the outcome of those events, and you knew full well what happened in there, you have been wrong. You've been severely mistaken as far as the events that count in the DC Comics universe. Major retcons in Justice League Incarnate #4, as well as the reveal of a brand new, well, not a brand new Flash, but a new Flash, or new character being called the Flash. I bet everyone was really excited to have a new Flash in the DC Comics universe. It's all coming courtesy of Joshua Williamson. Now, many of you will say, but Wes, you have sung the praises of Joshua Williamson, especially as of late. Yes, I have. I actually loved his Flash run. I'm a big fan of what he's doing with Batman. I'm a big fan of what he's doing with Robin. I'm a big fan of what he's doing in Deathstroke Inc. and a few other titles. And definitely, I'm like this, strong like bull for the Rogues. Not a big fan of Infinite Frontier, that miniseries that led into Justice League Incarnate. I actually noped out after 2 issues because I thought it was boring. And even though I knew, because we had been told Infinite Frontier was leading into Justice League Incarnate, which is leading into the next big crisis in 2022, I just don't care at this point. There's been so many crises and so many stupid retcons, and the DC Omniverse is just, generally speaking, frustrating to me as a reader, not to mention the linear verse. Who the hell thought of that one? Bet it wasn't Joshua Williamson. So therefore, I have personally chosen to nope out of Justice League Incarnate, whatever. But this issue was important, and I figured I should go over the ramifications, the fallout of Justice League Incarnate #4. It turns out all the villains like Anti-Monitor, Superboy Prime, The Extant, Dr. Manhattan, Barbados, they were not the big bads. They were actually all pawns of the Great Darkness. Some of you will say, but Wes, DC Comics literally just did this not all that long ago, didn't they? Didn't they just retcon all the events to make Perpetua the real big bad in every crisis in the history of DC Comics? In Dark Nights Death Metal, which was less than 18 months ago. Yes, you would be correct. That's exactly what happened. Scott Snyder decided that everything in the history of the DC Comics universe was leading to this moment. It had all been this big, hugely convoluted, concocted plan of Perpetua. But it turns out we were misled there as well. It was actually the Great Darkness. If you are unaware of the Great Darkness, this is I don't know if it's a character. It's an entity, right? I don't think it's a character, but it was created by the great Alan Moore in Swamp Thing #40 died as an off-screen deity that humans were trying to bring out of its slumber to retake over the universe. And we've seen it very, very sparsely since then. Although there were hints of this happening within a few of Joshua Williamson's comic books of late, certainly in Infinite Frontier, I believe in the very last issue. Also in Deathstroke Inc. #2, I believe we got a preview of the Great Darkness when the Weird, I believe it's the Weird, was freed and became aware of some things. And it appears that that's when the Great Darkness kind of showed itself a little bit. The wonderful Alan Moore, who thinks of comic books and world building on levels I could never conceive of, never thought of the Great Darkness as this, but it is being turned around and repurposed. Now, some of you are going to be confused and you're going to say the Great Darkness. I remember the Great Darkness saga, which I believe was Legion of Superheroes, had a lot to do with Darkseid. This story, Justice League Incarnate, is actually connecting all these things together, and it turns out the Great Darkness is actually intent on returning the DC Universe, the DC Multiverse, hell, the DC Omniverse, back to nothing, where the Great Darkness essentially was everything. But Wes, you like Joshua Williamson so much. Why are you mocking him? I don't think I'm mocking him. I'm just mocking the retcon because I'm tired of this stuff. But Joshua Williamson is a fantastic writer. I actually didn't stop reading Infinite Frontier because it was like poorly written. I stopped reading it because I just didn't care. And I still don't care about Justice League Incarnate, to be completely honest. But there's something in here that you and I should all know about. There's a 10-page sequence within Justice League Incarnate #4 that Dr. Multiverse narrates. and it reveals the Great Darkness's true part in the DC events over the past 30 plus years. Connected all of these events into one singular, perhaps convoluted, but supposedly linear continuity. The villains of pretty much every major DC crossover event are revealed to have been working for the Great Darkness all along, except we mentioned him earlier with the Great Darkness saga, Darkseid himself in Final Crisis. It turns out in Final Crisis that Darkseid was opposing the Great Darkness. His plan to kill everything in the universe was actually a trap to lure the Great Darkness out of hiding so it could be controlled by Darkseid himself. Unfortunately, as I mentioned, Darkseid was actually killed by Batman before he could mention the Great Darkness or his plan or how all of this stuff tied together. But Joshua Williamson obviously has filled in the blanks. Darkseid himself is actually not working for the Great Darkness. He's actually trying to catch the Great Darkness and use that power for himself. We also learned that the empty hand from the Multiversity event actually began as a piece of the Great Darkness himself. The literal right hand of the Great Darkness, which ended up shaking hands with the light in a treaty brokered by Swamp Thing. The Great Darkness's fingers on that hand actually became horns, and they grew into an independent being that is subservient to the Great Darkness himself, which would be the empty hand. For those of you like me that noped out of Infinite Frontier because you just didn't think it was all that interesting and have not bothered with Justice League Incarnate, Darkseid himself was resurrected in Infinite Frontier number 0. I'm sure some of you might remember that, and merged all the variants of the DC Comics universe into one being in the Omniverse and set out to control the Great Darkness again. So that is the story that they are telling within Justice League Incarnate, and we see within Justice League Incarnate number 4. And in this issue, Darkseid's battle took him to amass his armies against the Empty Hand and his gentry, but Darkseid is still on the case, and I don't think he's actually given up hope yet of controlling the Great Darkness himself. As I mentioned earlier, there's a big Crisis event that's been rumored for 2022 that was being ginned up in Infinite Frontier, Justice League Incarnate. Obviously, these events are heading towards that, and the Great Darkness is going to be a big part of that, likely Darkseid as well. And there's absolutely no way in hell that this also isn't related to Justice League 75, also known as Death of the Justice League, which is coincidentally, or probably not coincidentally, written by Joshua Williamson as well. And we know from the solicitation information of Justice League 75 that the team will end up falling to the Dark Army. I wonder who perhaps the Dark Army could be working for. Could it be the Great Darkness? I'm sure many of you can tell by my tone, and this is not an indictment on the quality of the story or the writing or whatever. I'm just tired of hearing the same stories over and over. We literally just had all these things retconned 18 months ago for Dark Knight's Death Battle. Can we do something new within DC Comics? James Tynion told the same Batman story twice within like 18 months, right after Tom King wrote the same story. They are literally just saying the same stuff over and over, and they're just retconning things willy-nilly to conform to the story. It's what I warned about with the introduction of the Omniverse. They're just going to play fast and loose with all this stuff, and instead of tailoring the stories to the characters in the universe and the history, they're going to move all those pieces around to fit their story. That is not good comic book writing when you are working within a shared comic book universe. In my opinion, you and I may disagree on that one, but I'm tired of it. It's time for the Omniverse to be abolished. It's doing no one any good, specifically the DC Comics writers and editors. They are taking every single shortcut imaginable, and they're literally just telling the same stories ad nauseum over and over at this point. Will it be good? It's Joshua Williamson. The chances are 75%, it's going to be good. He rarely really writes a dud anymore. So obviously there have been a few here and there. Is he going to do it better than Scott Snyder? This is a story or a type of story that Scott Snyder is very well known for and has executed multiple times. I don't really know because it doesn't feel like a Joshua Williamson story, but I do think Joshua Williamson is a great writer. So there's a good chance that this will be quality. Am I ready for another Crisis event? Unless it gets rid of the Omniverse, unless it just reverses us back to DC Rebirth or some version of that, they can call it whatever they want, where we just get the best versions of the best characters, we get rid of all the duplicates, and we start over again. What's the fucking point? What are you really fixing? It's just cash grab after cash grab after cash grab, but eventually they're going to realize when they stick their hand in there There's no more cash anymore because consumer confidence is gone, because people don't want to continue to pay money for the same stories over and over. Even if you tweak them a little bit, even if you put a new creator on. That is not the only news coming out of Justice League Incarnate number 4. We now have the new most important speedster in the multiverse. And wouldn't you know it, it is a girl, because of course she is. Earth Zero's Avery Ho of Justice League China has accepted the Flash mantle. She replaced Barry Allen in Justice League Incarnate when he was trapped within a pocket dimension, I believe in the very first issue. Initially, Avery refused the Flash mantle. She did not feel like that she had earned it. However, after several dangerous multiversal adventures with the super team, she finally understands the big role she plays on the team, and she has accepted the title as the most important Flash in the multiverse. And according to the article I read, it is well earned. I disagree. I'm so tired of all these Flashes. And this is not a new Flash. This Flash was actually introduced, I believe, in Josh Williamson's Flash run, issue number 3 or 4, somewhere really early in there. We've got enough Flashes. Let's get rid of the Flashes. And let's stop sucking China's dick. Can we stop doing that too? Can we stop trying to fillet China's ego on this one? I hate to break this to everybody. They don't like us, and they're never going to. It doesn't matter how many of our Justice League members we decide to make are Chinese. It doesn't matter how many scenes in Beijing we throw in Transformers, whatever. Sucking China's dick is going to get us nowhere. Let's stop doing that. Let's just stick with the heroes that we have and see if we can do something great there, because I think we can all agree within DC Comics, there's quality lacking across the board, and there are definitely things that could be done to make it all better. I'm tired of all the mantle swaps. I'm tired of every new version of these characters being a new gender, a new sexuality, a new race. Okay, we get it. You don't like the original male white heroes that were created 80 years ago, and you probably don't like the creators that did it. I'm sorry, you're stuck with them. Nobody's accepting a new Batman. Nobody's going to accept a new Flash, especially after what happened with Wally West when you brought Barry Allen back. Same thing with a Green Lantern. You already fucked everybody over with Kyle Rayner when you brought Hal Jordan back and you pushed everyone to the back burner. No more Superman. No more Batman. No more fucking Robins. How about that one too? I'm tired of all those goddamn Robins. There's enough of them anymore. How many children does Bruce Wayne have to traumatize before he learns from his mistakes that perhaps training children to be soldiers in his one-man crusade against crime in Gotham is not healthy for him, the city, or the children? Come on, man. What are you, heartless? What kind of sociopath do we think Bruce Wayne is? That is a rant for another day, but those are the events coming out of Justice League Incarnate number 4, a comic book I imagine the vast majority of you, even if you are DC Comics fans, did not read, because no one fucking cares. It's Justice League Incarnate. It's not Justice League. It was Infinite Frontier. Everyone dropped off that miniseries. I like Joshua Williamson. It's fucking overkill. You can't convince me that this crisis is important. You can't convince me that the retcons of all these crisis events for the last 30 plus years are important. It's the fucking omniverse. Everything happened and nothing happened. Until DC Comics can convince me that they're willing to acknowledge the mistakes that they've made and do something about them, whether it be a crisis to get us back to the basics, to the core heroes of the DC Comics universe, and stop trying to replace everybody and stop telling the same goddamn story over and over. I care about this stuff. I care about the DC Comics universe. Obviously, I'm here and I'm talking with you about it. But it's hard for me to take this shit too seriously. You know what I mean? Fuck it. There's another Flash. Everything's been retconned. It was all big part of a plan set in motion 5 million years ago. I've never heard any of these before. Recently, my good friend Dylan from the Real Comic Book Gamer joined me, and we talked about 5 things we would do to fix DC Comics almost immediately. It has a lot to do with personnel, getting people back in the DC Comics universe that love, respect, and honor the characters in the universe. I think a lot of us are going to agree on these, and you'll probably have a few things that you think would work as well.